Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. We had a very exciting one, full of rain and thunder and lightning last night. And I took this photograph of the city of Nairobi at 10 to 7 this morning. It's all snarled up now, in point of fact, so I'm glad I came in early. Home Thoughts, I read for the first time Seymour Hersh's The Dark Side of Camelot, and I enjoyed it. Very interesting. I'll put up an image of the book. But my conclusions are that the Kennedys were deeply political, and when you contextualize their actions against a political backdrop, Hersh's earth-shattering conclusions are anything but. And in fact, if you think of it and compare it to what goes on today, it looks like a kiddie's picnic, except for some very sort of white mischief type behaviour. I like this quotation of John F. Kennedy's: "Change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or the present are certain to miss the future." More interesting, I thought, and more powerful and more luminous a book about Kennedy, but about the assassination and Lee Harvey Oswald, was Don DeLillo's Libra. Was infinitely more revelatory, and I say that with some hesitation because Seymour Hersh otherwise is a most brilliant writer. From Don DeLillo Libra, that which we fear to touch is often the very fabric of our salvation. There's always more to it. This is what history consists of. It is the sum total of the things they aren't telling us. There is a world inside the world. Think of two parallel lines. One is the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. One is the conspiracy to kill the president. What bridges the space between them? What makes a connection inevitable? There is a third line that comes out of dreams, visions, intuitions, prayers, out of the deepest levels of the self. It's not generated by cause and effect, like the other two lines. It's a line that cuts across causality, cuts across time. It has no history that we can recognize or understand, but it forces a connection. It puts a man on the path of his destiny. If the world is where we hide from ourselves, what do we do when the world is no longer accessible? We invent a false name, invent a destiny, purchase a firearm through the mail. Natalie Avezan from Konya tweeted this photograph, Bir Mevlevi Dergahu, and I've actually been to Konya, and it really is a remarkable place, and if you ever get the chance, do go there. Trust me. And as you enter the mausoleum, which is well known, Konya, it's actually an industrial city, and if you do go there, you'll feel, where am I going exactly? And then you get to this place in the middle of the city, and it's really remarkable. I like this photograph, stunning views of the Calbuco volcano eruption in Chile, I found off Twitter. Political reflections, this struck me on Twitter, photo, people cremate bodies of earthquake victims in Kathmandu. This is Agence France Presse. And that it's awful what's happened. Israel says airstrike on Syrian border was targeting militants. Benjamin Netanyahu sent messages on Twitter saying any attempt to harm our soldiers and civilians will be met with a determined response. And I'll put up a photograph that Reuters posted. And then I was looking up the Golan Heights and for some contemporaneous photography about it. I didn't find anything, but I found this, a horse in the snow in the Golan Heights near the Israel-Syria border, April the 22nd. President Obama, tongue-in-cheek, said, "I look so old that John Boehner has already invited Netanyahu to speak at my funeral." Yanis Varoufakis tweeted an FDR quote from 1936, "They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred." A quotation close to my heart and reality these days, he said. According to Bloomberg, he cut a lonely figure on Friday morning as he prepared for the meeting. 53-year-old academic walked with no entourage through the lobby of the Radisson Blu, clutching a mobile phone and a newspaper. There's this happiness index, and according to the Bloomberg interpretation, it took a hit as Greece, Italy, Spain struggled. Switzerland has the highest, most happy country, followed by its northern European neighbours Iceland, Denmark and Norway. US ranked 15th, behind countries including Mexico, Israel, Costa Rica and Australia. However, this caught my attention. 8 of the 10 countries with the lowest happiness average were in sub-Saharan Africa, with the remaining 2 being Syria and Afghanistan. Togo, with a score of 2.8, ranked last, days before a presidential election on Saturday. When women thrive, so will the world, says Shinzo Abe, and I couldn't agree with him more. When I took office in 2012, I was determined to promote a society in which all women had a chance to shine. Indeed, Japan cannot truly thrive in the 21st century unless our citizens reach their fullest potential, he said. And he's explaining what he thinks, talking about a terrible loss of talent, that women will fall off the workforce. I spoke to Bashar al-Assad, this is Seymour Hersh, saying Assad assumed the presidency after his father's death in 2000 when he was 34 years old, and he expressed some sympathy for President Obama, who, like Assad, was confronted with a steep learning curve. On President Obama, he said Bush gave Obama this big ball of fire, and it was burning domestically and internationally. Obama, he does not know how to catch it. My view is that President Obama has done a sterling job in trying to catch that big ball of fire within the context of how he can operate in this new sort of super fluid environment that we live in. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said the US supported North Caucasus separatists in the 2000s. Intercepted calls showed that the US helped separatists in Russia's northern Caucasus in the 2000s. I think he is surely not wrong. The euro, last time I checked, was around 108.50. It touched on Friday a 2-week high of 109 and goes as high as 110. It's really extraordinary the way the foreign exchange markets are trading. Dollar index is around the 90.86 level. Japanese yen, when I walked in, was at 118.94, but when I looked last was above 119.20. But we've been in this range, 118 and change up to 120. Swissy 0.9548, the pound was at 151.80, but now is around 151.40. Aussie 0.7813, been very firm lately. India rupee 63.675, South Korean won 1074.36, the Rial still below 3, 295.20, Egyptian pound 764.11, South African rand 1210.96. I'll put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. US data near term has been soft. Data on Friday showed US business investment spending plans fell for a 7th straight month in March, suggesting the economy was struggling to rebound. And the FOMC is scheduled to begin a meeting on Tuesday, but no change is expected in interest rates. Euro dollar, let me put up a 3-month chart, quite a recovery from 104, just below 105. I like this review of the Jaguar XF. For those who don't want the standard luxury sedan. Most luxury cars these days have leather seats, but most don't retain the thick scent of a Hermes saddle shop when you sit inside. Oh my, that's worth a bit. The Jaguar XF does. If you close your eyes and inhale as you slip behind the wheel, you could be forgiven a momentary pause. The tanned essence lingers even after the initial impression. It's the first hint of this car's aristocratic credentials, sticky on the brain, like the bourbon musk of a just empty tumbler. Put up a photograph of this Jaguar XF, and then I put up a photograph of myself in a Jaguar in Johannesburg last year. My, it's fun to drive. I ended up buying one. Nanex LLC. First 25 seconds of Amazon, they say, and he puts out tremendous visual presentations of things. Have a look at this. According to the Wall Street Journal, no one believes China's GDP figure of 7%, and they're showing you what the highball and lowball calls are. Gold trades poorly. It's around the 1181 level. I'll put up a 3-month chart. Crude oil, I think, is topped out for now and headed back to around 50. I'll put up a 3-month chart of that as well, and I agree with this comment. It may have been the bears running for cover last week, but that leaves the longs more vulnerable. Nanex again saying the spoofing continues from Brent crude this morning. Have a look at his frontier markets. It was a devastating 7.9 Nepal earthquake, leaving over, I believe, 3,000 dead now, and they're still digging people out. And it really is very, very sad. I feel awful for the people and the families. Sub-Saharan Africa police killed 2 in protest against Burundian president seeking 3rd term. Witnesses said police used water cannons, tear gas, in some cases live bullets, to disperse demonstrators across Bujumbura. The authorities earlier banned all protests either for or against President Pierre Nkurunziza's renewed candidacy. He was nominated as its presidential candidate on Saturday, and it's obviously set off a sequence of events. I'll put up some tweet images I found from Twitter. Arab Tom Ness, Burundi. Burundi seems to be going down the same road as Burkina Faso, he tweets. And that takes me back to that piece I wrote about Ouagadougou's signal to sub-Saharan Africa. I said the tipping point for the accelerated sequence of events was President Compaore's stacking parliament in order to extend the presidential term limit. There are plenty of African presidents who are seeking to pull off the same magic trick, and events in Ouagadougou have surely put them on notice, but evidently not the Burundian president. During the Arab Spring, nearly all commentators spoke of how this North African wildfire could not leap the Sahara and head to sub-Saharan Africa. The reasons were that the state, the incumbents, had a monopoly on the tools of violence and would bring overwhelming force and violence to bear. We need to ask ourselves, how many people can an incumbent shoot dead? In such a situation, 100, 1,000, 10,000, this is another point. There is a threshold beyond which the incumbent can't go. Where that threshold lies will be discovered in the throes of the event. And I said, therefore, the preeminent point to note is that protests in Burkina Faso achieved escape velocity. The question is, have they achieved them in Burundi yet? No. I will not be a candidate for anything. My name will not feature on the ballot paper, said Boni Yai, who's also another chap everyone thought was going to be seeking a 3rd term. The Economist, the pioneering continent in Africa, innovation is increasingly local. A very interesting article saying technologies are opening up African markets that have been long closed or did not previously exist. Facebook joined up with phone operators to make internet connectivity available free through an initiative known as internet.org, saying Africa's innovation revolution is still in its infancy, but it is likely to gain pace, not least because new models and forms of financing startups are also being developed. Ernst & Young tweeted, "Happy Freedom Day, celebrating 21 years of democracy." This is South Africa. My weekend piece was a curious juxtaposition, xenophobia in the South African All-Share Index. Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, describes South Africa as having enormous potential and also a lot of risk. South Africa announced it was sending the army to townships around Johannesburg and Durban in the first deployment to quell civilian unrest since 2008. The risks. "We will deploy troops to volatile areas," said the defense minister. "We are deploying because it is an emergency." The Zulu king, Goodwill Zwelithini, appealed for calm, but added in his speech to 10,000 people in Durban that if he had given an order to kill foreigners, this country would be reduced to ashes. The South African economy has been hit hard by rolling power blackouts and a seemingly intractable unemployment rate, which clocks about 24%. However, evidently at the street level, this has become a tinderbox and is proving attractive for pyromaniacs like the king. South Africa is experiencing its worst anti-immigrant attacks in 7 years. Mainly foreign shop owners in townships have been driven from their businesses. Let's set aside the point that immigrants are typically very hardworking and add global fluency to an economy, and that South Africa's softly approach to Zimbabwe has seen that economy halve in size since 2000, and has seen Zimbabweans do a Norman Tebbit. Norman Tebbit was a minister in Mrs. Thatcher's government and famously told the British to get on their bike and find a job. Therefore, part of the inward immigration problem is due to a seriously suboptimal Zimbabwe economy, which is forcing its citizens to look for opportunities in South Africa. The cause and effect of this xenophobia can be seen across the continent, with a number of businesses in Mozambique, for example, evacuating their South African staff. The South African consulate in Abuja has been shuttered, and South African firms which have been expanding across the continent, like ShopRite, and you might not know this, but just 5 ShopRite stores in Angola sell more cans of energy drink Red Bull than in all of ShopRite's 382 stores in South Africa. Banks, others must all be nervously looking over their shoulder because the blowback could gain a lot of traction. Against this backdrop, the South African All-Share Index has posted a blistering rally of 12.42% year to date and has now crossed the 55,000 level for the first time. Frontier markets tend to confound expectations, and I think the South African market has floated higher on the ECB QE boost. Mario Draghi has wrestled a great deal of the euro into negative interest rates, and I suspect it is this surplus Mario Draghi liquidity that has washed up on South Africa's shores, because on the fundamentals, the trailing PE of 20 is not cheap. I concluded by saying the challenge in South Africa is a political one. It is surely easier to blame the other. It is wrong, but it's probably a big vote winner. Therefore, the political temptation is to race to the bottom, in my view. South African All-Share, as I said, up 12.42%, above 55,000 for the first time, and at a record. I'll put up a photograph of the sunset, November the 1st last year, Johannesburg. Dollar rand, when I checked, was at 12.1096. Egyptian pound, 764.11. Egyptian stock market is now negative 2.32% year to date, and has eased back 14.056% since closing at a multi-year high on February the 4th. Nigerian All-Share is up a marginal 0.04%, but has rallied sharply from a 2-year low in the middle of February. I like this photograph of General Buhari that the Brookings Institute posted on Twitter, and the Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index is plus 0.54% so far this year. Britam reported an adjustment to their full-year profit after tax, a reduction of 342 million shillings, and that reduced the EPS from 1.47 to 1.31, and also announced the resignation of Mr. Rawat, who sat on their board and was responsible for, and its family has more than 20% of Britam shares. TransCentury reported a full-year earnings per share loss of 8 shillings and 53 cents versus a previous profit of 1 shilling and 6 cents. They took a hit on, they sold their 34% stake, I think 34 and change, 34% stake in Kenya Railways. I'll put up a photograph of the Mombasa Nairobi Railway just outside the entrance to Savo, and another one of the railway crossing, Manyani Gate, Savo. They sold that position. They had it valued at a higher price than the balance sheet. Talking about revenue adversely affected by a 36% drop in engineering division revenue. Power division up 7%, increased volumes, new markets. They're looking at power infrastructure, transport infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure, and mining infrastructure. I think they've repositioned their business, but obviously the sticker shock value saw the share trade sharply low on Friday. Ipsos asks, are things in Kenya generally going in the right or the wrong direction? They're doing some trend analysis. Have a look at what they put forward. Kenya shilling at a fresh 3-year low, 94.223. Nairobi All-Share up 5.93% year to date, bounced 0.97 points up on Friday. Safaricom closed at a fresh record high, It's up 23.131% year to date, and will report full year earnings May the 7th. If you haven't seen that interview I did with Bob at the time of his first half results, please watch it. If you've got any suggestions for questions for him at his full year results, please advise me. Vimal tweeted Bob Collymore speaking at the Michael Milken Institute conference. Yeah, Bob was speaking about the mobile revolution in Africa. Safaricom is set to launch its own internet-enabled digital television decoders next month, stepping up the battle for TV and data consumers. In talks with local free-to-air broadcasters for consent to air their content, buyers of the high-speed 4G-enabled Safaricom decoders will also have access to video on demand and downloads. It essentially gives you a Wi-Fi hotspot at home with 4G speeds. The NSE 20 is down 0.9976% so far this year. Kenya's Eliud Kipchoge crossed the finish line to win the men's 2015 London Marathon. Well done to Eliud. Richard Vine, the Chief Executive Officer of the Old Pajeta Conservancy, discusses the differences between the northern white and the southern white rhino in this photograph taken by Zinua and Corbis. Just quickly look at the markets last week. They actually closed lower week on week. Nairobi Securities Exchange has been underperforming its sub-Saharan African peers, Nigeria having ramped up 25% since closing at a 2-year low on February the 13th. South African all shares, I mentioned, is at a fresh record. But Friday, the all share bounced 0.97 of a points. NSE 20 bounced 34.29 points. Safaricom closed at a fresh record, and we saw a better tone. So it'll be interesting to see whether that tone continues today. Once again, thank you for stopping by. If you want to track the stock market in real time, just register on rich.co.k. It's free. Just get a password. Once you get that password, go to Rich Live. If you want to have a look at the whole market, there's a normal board, and if you want to look at a specific stock, it's called the Expert Board. Once again, thank you.